Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, host also of RT's talk show, Crosstalk. Well, it's been a very dramatic 48 hours in U.S. Russian relations. Um, President Biden gave an interview to George Stephanopoulos of ABC News, in which, amidst a lot of rambling about all sorts of topics, Biden was asked by George Stephanopoulos whether he considered President Putin a killer. And Biden did indeed take the bait and said, yep, I think he is a killer. And he also said that he considered him as somebody lacking in soul, and alleged that he had actually said this to Putin's face some years ago, that he lacked soul. And according to Biden, Putin had responded something along the lines, well, now we understand each other. This did not go down terribly well, understandably, with the Russians. They don't, strange people, they don't particularly like their president being called a killer and lacking soul. And the Russian Foreign Ministry announced that it was recalling the Russia's ambassador to the United States. So for consultations and to see whether there was any possibility of restoring U.S.-Russian relations, or is it now completely hopeless matter? Then today, the Russian Foreign Ministry issued yet another very strongly worded statement, essentially saying we see no evidence from the Americans, despite all these accusations, that we interfered in their election. The references to the ODNI report that we discussed in the last gaggle. We see no evidence, it's just all accusations. Whereas on the other hand, we do see evidence of direct American interference in our own internal affairs. For instance, as happened in the recent demonstrations over the trial and imprisonment of Alexei Navalny, in which there was a direct link to the US embassy. So there was that. And then there was an extraordinary statement by President Putin when he was asked about the Biden's comments. He enigmatically said that, well, what I would say to Biden to his face is, I wish you good health. Take it however you want to take it. So is that. And then he said, well, Biden's remarks kind of reminds me of what we used to do as children. Whenever we called somebody a name, it inevitably came back to us and said that, yeah, that's what you are. In English, the expression is like, if you call somebody something, you're a fool or whatever, the response is, it takes one to know one. And I think that's kind of what Putin.
Or projection.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Projection. That's the fancier word. But he was talking about how, children, responded. And he said, that's kind of, yeah, that's, the way I look at the Americans. And then, of course, Putin pointed out to, if we're going to talk about other countries' history, we can certainly point to unpleasant and tragic aspects of American history. He obviously talked about the genocide of the native population, the legacy of slavery. And interestingly, he brought up the use of the atom bomb against Japan when there was no military necessity for it whatsoever. So this is where we are at. This is a very, very bad situation between U.S.-Russian relations. I don't think there was any time in the Cold War when there was anything like this. At the height of it, Stalin's last years, the Khrushchev and the crises over Berlin and Cuba, it was never like this. Peter, what's your take?
Well, we have ample evidence now, is what we have been saying for months, is that the Russiagate hoax has become policy. It's as simple as that. The callousness and unprofessionalism Okay, well, first of all, the question was a gimme. I mean, that's exactly what George Stephanopoulos wanted to hear. Okay, because ABC News, like the rest of them, peddled the hoax. Okay, and they've never owned up to it. They never will. They never do. But then Biden took the bait and just said it. Okay, I mean, and for what purpose? What purpose was served by saying that? What he should have said, it would have said, Vladimir Putin is my interlocutor, if we like it or not. We question and condemn their behavior, but the answer to a politician, you don't an open and closed question. You should know the difference, okay? Right. Which of course he's showing that he's a tough guy, a frail old man showing that he's a tough guy. Right. Scott Ritter, the former weapons inspector that was involved with weapons inspection prior to the illegal invasion of Iraq, has a wonderful article today on RT, and he went through the probability of Biden ever saying Putin had no soul, and he pretty much puts that one to bed too. It is extremely unlikely that Joe Biden had a one-on-one with Vladimir Putin. Okay, and there wouldn't have been a readout from it. And why did he say it now and didn't say it then?
Right. Particularly, it was something that it was Hillary Clinton who had used that expression when she was making fun of George W. Bush, who had said that I looked into his eyes and saw his soul, and then she said, "Oh, he has no soul because he's just a KGB apparatchik." So Biden is just plagiarizing as he won't.
Well, and I think my first reaction to all of this is probably very different than most people, and I'll tell you why. Last night I was preparing for a recording of Crosstalk, which I just completed and returned home, and it was on the summit or meeting in Anchorage, the U.S. Chinese confab. And what I thought was really interesting was when I saw George Stephanopoulos' question and Biden's answer, I just thought, how convenient when this is going on in Anchorage. I mean, the Chinese must be laughing their socks off right now. And there are plenty of people like me that are saying, enough of this. How does this move the needle? How does it improve relations? Obviously, you don't want to improve relations with either country, okay? So, I just threw my arms about it. My guest on my program before we started the recording asked me about it, and I just went, what did you expect? What did you expect when the Russiagate hoax becomes policy right now? But see, what this does is that every single administration paints themselves into a box, okay? So, if this person is soulless, how could that person be an interlocutor? Oh, we want him to go. Well, I wish it were Christmas every day, but it's not, and it's not going to happen, okay? See, this is wish projection, and it has nothing to do with reality whatsoever. And so, we saw this. We've been seeing this now for the last few weeks. Finally, is that this is just a falling apart. Okay, I mean, and they made it very definitive. And I think that I don't see there's any reason for the Russians to send an ambassador back to the United States anytime soon. Why?
No, I don't think so either. I mean, I think that the hostility toward Russia is very deep seated. I think it goes beyond the bitterness over the 2016 election. I think it is the U.S. Foreign policy elite that has surmised that for the past 10 years, Russia has really been leading the global coalition resisting American violations of international law. That is leading the global coalition in favor of national sovereignty, of taking the UN Charter seriously, that member states do not interfere in the internal affairs of other member states. It's leader of the global coalition against the war on terror, against humanitarian intervention. And they know this because although China is the formidable economic power, Russia is the formidable military and diplomatic power, because no one can rival Russia as in terms of diplomatic prowess. They learned this during the Cold War when the Soviet Union essentially led kind of a giant world coalition. which was Americans were fuming at the United Nations because much of the third world would vote with the Soviet Union because the Soviet Union was addressing their issues. And I think that this is what is driving people like Blinken and Sullivan and the Democratic Party, some of the national security state crazy, is that Russia is the leader of a kind of an anti-American movement. And I think that that's why they're constantly targeting Russia, even though people like Tucker Carlson say, oh, it's not an economic power, or it's on a par with Spain or Italy, which is stupid and wrong. But even if it were, they know why Russia is in their crosshairs, because Russia is this leader of a coalition.
Well, and what most people don't realize, first of all, GDP to GDP can be sometimes apples and oranges.
Yeah,
okay?
absolutely. Exactly.
It doesn't really mean a whole lot. Okay, I mean, Russia's a leader in high tech. It's a leader in nuclear technology.
Space exploration.
It can put a person in space much faster, much easier, much cheaper, and maybe even safer. I would go that far. There's so many different rubrics there that you can apply. So I always kind of just put that aside. But what I always find very interesting, and I always try to tell when I teach master classes, is that Russia marshals its limited resources in a very effective way. See, the United States can make mistakes, and it makes mistakes all of the time because it has enormous power and capital to expend, and it's expending it a lot. But the Russians are very, laser-like focused, what they want to do and how to do it. I mean, let's look at, Syria in the waning days of the Obama administration. It was the Russians every single time that tirelessly worked for ceasefires. And once everybody agreed, who broke the ceasefire? It was the U.S. that did it. Okay, they just couldn't count. They couldn't see. The problem is that the Blinkens and the Sullivans and people like that, they cannot consonant the idea that America has peers. See, that's not in their worldview. You must submit, and if you don't submit, we will do everything in our power to damage you in every single way. But they don't have the same kind of power that they used to. Okay, that's as simple as that. And again, I think that the fact that Joe Biden is on this escapade based on no real world evidence here, and here that Blinken wants to go lecture the Chinese now. I mean, this is just comical. It's really comical, and they wonder why that Moscow and Beijing have an entente that is getting deeper and deeper. And so this is just foolishness. And what it does is that it allows them never to admit that they were wrong. They were wrong on so many things, and now it is the predicate. It's the predicate for much of American foreign policy. It's based on an illusion and a hoax.
Right, and of course it is a very dangerous situation because there are many parts of the world that America and Russia are actually eyeball to eyeball. They're eyeball to eyeball in Syria. They're eyeball to eyeball now in Ukraine. They're eyeball to eyeball in the Baltic and in the Black Sea. And given this level of hostility, given this calling a leader a killer, something could easily go wrong. I mean, we've already seen that within the military, I mean, that they are highly politicized. We know that they were lying to President Trump about the extent of, say, the American presence in Syria. They are people who are clearly wedded to the idea of trying to do as much damage to Russia as possible. So it may well be that we could get into an unpleasant confrontation in Syria, in which Washington will not have the proper information, or even if it does have the proper information, it will willfully misinterpret the information and act foolishly. And that can also happen given that it's a very weak leadership at the top. We don't even know who's actually in charge. Biden doesn't look like he's in charge. So who's minding the store? Who's actually making the decisions on war and peace in Washington? So something unpleasant could easily happen in Syria, in Ukraine, and given the weak leadership at the top in Washington, it could escalate into something very dangerous.
Let's give our audience a juxtaposition here. What threatens the United States other than its elites? Okay, we have an open border right now. Who's coming through? We don't know. Okay, that is an internal threat. But is there any military threat to the United States? There is none. No, there is no meaningful threat to the United States. Okay, the juxtaposition is Russia was invaded by Napoleon, by Nazi Germany. It created a buffer zone after the Second World War, fearing the return of German militarism. Gorbachev, and we could talk long and hard about this, essentially exited the Cold War. The Soviet Union didn't lose the Cold War, it just stopped participating in it. And I think that's an important way to look at this, okay? It wasn't defeated, it just opted out. And the reason why this long introduction here, Russians take their sovereignty seriously. Let me repeat that. They take their sovereignty seriously. And if the U.S. military and its NATO allies want to be mucking around with flying over borders and things like this and violating agreements like on the Black Sea, there's going to be trouble. I guarantee you there will be trouble because it's their border. Right. They're not mucking around in the Western Hemisphere, okay? Right. This is home turf. And they will do whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. And it's made clear that they will use whatever means they have.
Right. No, that's exactly right. I think that there is a red line. Ukraine was a red line, and they made it clear to Obama in 2014 that this is a red line for them. Ukraine, that's, anyone planning on invading Russia goes through Ukraine. Belarus the same. So, therefore, this is something that is absolutely essential. So any talk, oh, they're going to join NATO, we're going to hold NATO membership open for them, that is a red line, and for the Russians, no way are they going to just put up with.
Well, what if they do that, and it's in the cards, obviously, then Donetsk and Lugansk will leave.
I think it goes beyond that. They will not allow Ukraine to be a member.
The first thing is you're going to have the Donbass. They're going to leave.
Right.
Then the Ukrainian state becomes even more unstable, and then you'll have other regional parts of the country that will opt out as well, and you will see the disintegration of Ukraine. Okay, that's what's going to happen. Then you're going to have an important border state that Russia fears because of potential NATO membership, and NATO looking with very greedy eyes to expand it to the east. That's called war. Let's be clear. Let's be clear. It's war.
I mean, it's as much a red line as if Mexico forged a military alliance with Russia. I mean, how would the United States respond? The United States would respond with an open invasion. I mean, the United States would just step in and say like it cannot happen, and they would invade. And for the Russians as well, that is a red line. It is completely unacceptable for Ukraine to be a member of NATO. And so that's an important point to realize when we get to Russia, there's certain things are a red line. Now, the red line for them has moved many miles to the east. When you mentioned Gorbachev, that red line was way out in the west. They were actually in Germany, they had Poland, Hungary, everything. So, that therefore they were obviously much safer because they had, a nice buffer zone extending into the west. They've lost that now, which is why they would get so alarmed by anything like NATO membership for Ukraine. But what is also, for Russians is that this is what Biden is now doing, and what Washington's been doing now for some years is openly insulting. I mean, you go around saying he's a killer. You go around closing down consulates. You go around accusing Russia of murder, of using chemical weapons using chemical weapons, assassinating dissidents or attempting to assassinate dissidents. You go around keep saying this to the Russians, and and they're getting fed up with it.
And Khashoggi is a murderer, but he's not on the list.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So they're saying, you keep saying this, and then you say, oh, but we would like to have agreements with you. Look, we're going to sign a new START agreement, and we would like to negotiate Afghanistan with you. I say, you know what? I mean, you insult us, you sanction us, you threaten us. And then, oh, pretty please, can you help us out in Afghanistan? That's just, it's not going to happen.
Well, I mean, if something goes terribly wrong, no, let me rephrase that. When something goes terribly wrong in Syria, what's going to happen, George, when no one picks up in Moscow?
Right. Right. Well, that's yeah. No, that's right. And the foolishness of the Americans is that they're convinced that the Russians are far more eager to negotiate and to talk and agree to something with the Americans than they are. So it's like we're doing the Russians a favor by occasionally picking up a phone and saying, we'd like to negotiate this, and this with you. And the Russians will jump to, oh, good, yeah, oh, you're taking us seriously, you're going to negotiate. Russians have no interest in.
Look, I remember it was during the Syrian crisis, and I remember reading in Bloomberg News is that the Obama White House is trying to figure out a way to allow the Russians an off-ramp from their involvement in Syria, or like their treachery in Syria.
That's exactly that. That was
but see, again, they're looking for a way out but then they'll say, but when the Russians are gone, everything will be fine. Why would you think that? Okay.
Right.
Anyway, the article was stupid as usual, but I always keep finding a way for the Russians, a way out for them. Okay. Right. No, as a matter of fact, their foreign policy is far better thought out than anything that's come out of Washington in decades.
Right. No, the off-ramp thing is a very good example. So, well, what we'll do is, we'll give them a port. They only want a port. They have no other interest in Syria. We'll give them a port, as if it's ours to give them. And lo and behold, Russians really weren't interested in that. I mean, they had a lot of irons in the fire in Syria, and they weren't just going to be fobbed off with a port. So the same way they think, oh well, it's time for an agreement because there's an election coming up, so we'll just have a nice little agreement with the Russians, a photo op, and that'll give us a nice hundreds of thousands of votes in the coming election. Russia will not play this stupid game.
The thing that what the media, it's so misleading and dishonest, is that there's this silly belief. I know you'll find it silly, but this is what they spin. When Putin goes, everything changes.
Right.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't change anything. Right. As a matter of fact, see, this is what they don't understand. It's Russia's Putin, not Putin's Russia. Remember that, okay? Because of the conditions that were created after the fall of the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact, and the West malevolent behavior towards the new Russia created Vladimir Putin, created the conditions. It didn't necessarily have to be the person Vladimir Putin, but it certainly would have been a person like Vladimir Putin. And the person that comes after him is going to be not much different because the country's interests do not change. See, they project it all on one person. They always do that. Once we get rid of Gaddafi, once we get rid of Saddam Hussein, it's always that, because that's easy to sell it to the public. Okay, it's like a tabloid way of thing, but they don't understand the national interest because they don't believe in sovereignty, or they only believe in the sovereignty of themselves and no one else has sovereignty. Right. See, this is why the people get such a warped view of other countries in the world. Xi, the dictator of China, he's not a dictator, okay? He's head of the Communist Party of China. And my interlocutors in China always tell me that the party is popular and that he is popular. Why? Because he delivers the goods. That's what they want, deliverable.
Well, I think that's right. And I think that the example with the Soviet Union is an interesting one because at the time of the fall of communism, there was a lot of very naive ideas about the West, and I think that was throughout in Eastern Europe and in the Soviet Union. They had the idea of the West Churchill, Reagan, Thatcher. That's all these are, great. These are people celebrating democracy, freedom, whatever. And that you can't step into the same river twice. They're not going to have that same illusion now. Oh, we'll get rid of Putin, and suddenly we'll have this wonderful West, which is really friendly and open to us and eager to welcome us with open arms. I mean, they saw what the West did. They saw how the West took advantage of Russia's vulnerabilities and rammed home the West's temporary advantage. They're not going to fall for that. They're not going to say, oh, Biden, these are good guys. Let's do a deal with them.
What people inside the Beltway don't understand is that I watch Netflix sitting in Moscow. And you know what, George? I can watch it in the Russian language. So millions and millions of Russians are exposed to Western culture and what Hollywood, the junk that they generate, and people see it. And I'll tell you, most people say it's kind of entertaining, but I don't want that here. Okay, every man is a lunatic. Every man is a murderous idiot and unemployed. Why are all the men in Netflix always portrayed negatively? People ask me this all the time, and that's what they're selling right now. They say, yeah, it's interesting, but I don't want that to come here. That's weird. It has nothing to do with real world. I know. Okay. I'm saying, is that again, these people in power and make policy, they think that the Russian people have no agency. They say that's how they deal with everyone in the world. They focus on an individual, and there's agency anywhere else. Unless they give it agency, like the protests in Hong Kong, they turn them into active agents, okay? But everybody else is a passive, is passive. They're under siege. I mean, it's a cartoon. It's a cartoon.
I mean, that's right. And I think that when you look at American culture, again, they see American culture, and it's a very different American culture from the one that they used to watch. Back during World War II, when the Soviet Union actually opened up to the world, and they were showing American movies. So Russian people, hey, these are great, wonderful. These are great, Jimmy Cagney movies, Humphrey Bogart movies. They love this stuff. Jimmy Stewart. Hollywood isn't Jimmy Cagney and Humphrey Bogart anymore. They look at it and say, this is awful stuff. This the twerking or whatever. There's children who are doing the twerking, and then they have these other things like the U.S. administration, which is trying to push boys into competing against girls, allowing boys into girls' locker rooms and things. This isn't what we want here. So the American belief that somehow their culture is very appealing, no, it really isn't.
A good friend of mine, Anatole Levin, someone that I have a lot of respect for, and I have had the privilege to meet a number of times. He was here. I think it was 2010 or something like that. And RT had a gathering, and he was there, and we went outside I think I was still smoking tobacco then, and he does. And he just said some really very insightful things that really made me laugh. He said, you know what the problem with Americans are, Peter? And I said, what? He said, Americans think everyone wants to be an American. And he said, it's not true, okay? And it's one of those myths that we Americans are brought up with. Everyone wants to be like us. Well, no, I'll give you another good example. A very good friend of mine went to Harvard Business School, and he's a Russian man, and he's extremely well-known and respected economist. And he told me on one of my programs once, he said, I really appreciate the knowledge that I learned at American universities, but your values? No. I took the knowledge and came home, okay, and applied that knowledge here. And he said, it's best practices. That's how a lot of people, smart people, say best practices. I like that, but the package, now I'm not really interested in the package.
Well, I think that's right. And I think that it's become doubly, triply, quintuply so with the Biden people, the people who are now coming to the fore in the Biden era. This is really unappealing too much as well. I mean, if you get somebody like Emmanuel Macron in France, I mean, who's kind of part of, he himself is a part of this woke culture. If he's saying, hey, we don't want what's going on in America in our country. I mean, if it's that bad that even the French are saying, we don't want all this woke craziness here. Can you imagine what the Russians are saying? What can you what the Hungarians and the Czechs and the Poles are saying?
One of the things, again, these professional careerists in American elites is that the one thing that's a remarkable phenomenon happened with the end of the Cold War is that secularization just increased in an intensity in the West, but religiosity returned to the East, okay? And this is something that they don't understand because they think religion is just, it's for silly people, it's for dumb people. And a lot of people here feel very differently about it because it's part of their cult. Not only is it an issue of religiosity, but it's a cultural issue as well. That's how they feel attached to their culture. Right. And I'm not saying people are, are crowding in the church. I mean, no, people have returned to the church, but now they've accepted it as part of their culture. That's one of the things I've always said is that the animosity that Western elites have towards countries like Russia, because Russia is a conservative country. It is openly conservative. It accepts modernism, not postmodernism, because they accept that there are two genders, that there are borders. There is something called sovereignty and national interest. That is everything against this postmodernist wokist agenda.
No, I think
and I think that's really where the conflict comes. It's not just power politics.
No, I think that's
right.
Right.
Accept our culture.
Yeah, that's right, and that's why that I think we are entering. We already entered some years ago a Cold War, a new Cold War, and there is an ideological component to it. The people say, "Oh no, there's no Cold War because there's no ideological component." There is an ideological component because Russia is the champion of a kind of cultural conservatism, international law, national sovereignty, respect for territorial integrity, United Nations Charter, and a respect for some of those traditional conservative values, which is family, church, and so on. So yeah, these are becoming sort of the new defining aspect of this Cold War. So and therefore, yeah, it's not the old one, communism versus capitalism. No, that's not what this new Cold War is about. But there's a different Cold War, an ideological Cold War, and we're getting who's on which side. And it's interesting enough, not too different from the protagonists of the first Cold War.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is what probably the most important thing Putin ever did in his long time in power is in the early years is his war on the oligarchs, because he basically made it clear you've become rich because of the largesse and the genius of the people of this country. Now, what you want is like Hodorkovsky, he wanted to become part of the global elites. Okay, he wanted to be part of that system, and Putin said, no, you serve the national interests of this country first. You just don't become a member of the club that goes to the Hamptons every weekend. Okay, we just have the Russians now, because we've co-opted the Brits, the French, the Germans, the Italians, the Japanese, the Koreans. They're all co-opted. It's called elite capture. And Putin said, no, you can have your nice toys from the West, fine, okay, and we're going to tax the hell out of you and stay out of politics. That's my job. And it's worked, okay? And I don't even use the term oligarchs anymore. These are just big business people, okay? That's another thing. That's another thing that irritates the West. So they couldn't capture the elites.
Right. Well, that's exactly right. And so that's why Putin is emphasizing, national cultures, national traditions, national uniqueness. And I think that's why many countries would find this message rather attractive. Even in Europe, I mean, NATO's of course grabbed up all the members, the used to be the member states of the Warsaw Pact. They're all now part of NATO. But even within this, those countries in the East find the Russian message rather attractive. I mean, obviously Orban in Hungary. Orban is a very powerful and influential figure in Europe. The Czechs, the Slovaks,
The Poles.
the Poles. I mean, the Poles are of course a little bit,
Yeah, a little messed up. Okay.
messed up, because of this visceral hatred they have for the Russians. But the message, the actual ideological message, it's very close to what's coming.
I lived in Poland for over 10 years. It's a conservative country.
Very conservative. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think that's right. And of course, in the rest of the world, again, would be very, very open to Russia's message. And that's why, I mean, the U.S. elite is targeting Russia. I mean, it's not an oversight. I mean, they know that they want to get the Russians out.
What really irritates these Western elites is that by design or by accident, maybe we can discuss it later, but there is an alternative.
Yeah, that's right.
And so if you use the rubric of the Cold War, yes, communism, capitalism, but now it's postmodernism and rejection of postmodernism. That is the alternative, and it is attractive to a lot of people, and that irritates them so much because this is a great cultural revolution. This is what they're trying to export.
Right. No, I think that's right. I think we're beginning to see the outlines of this new Cold War. It's the defining features are becoming clearer and clearer, and if we have bad leadership, it could get very nasty. I mean, even in the old Cold War, there were one or two times when it came close to a hot war. Could well happen now. I mean, I would say the leadership of the Western countries today is worse, more incompetent, more ignorant than the leadership during the first Cold War. So that's why I think it's a more dangerous situation now than it was 60 years ago. And even then, it was kind of touch and go.
Well, I mean, and what we have is this nonstop threat inflation.
Yep.
I mean, they talk the talk, but once it gets to a point where you have to make a decision, are you going to keep talking the talk, or do you believe your own BS? I mean, this is what really gets really bizarre. I mean, do you believe your own propaganda?
Yep.
Because, if you do, it could get catastrophic. I keep telling people, it's so important, Russia will defend its sovereignty. It will not compromise.
Right. No, that's right. And now it is very concerned about its security, very concerned about what the United States is up to. So it would be that much more alarmed by any American intervention in Central Asia, in the Caucasus, anywhere at all, whether they fear that somehow America would find a bridgehead, whether it's in Georgia or Armenia or Azerbaijan, anywhere they think the Americans are looking for a bridgehead, the Russians will just resist ferociously and just drive the United States out. I mean, the Russians are taking the American threat very seriously.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right, Peter, thank you very much. We will, of course, maintain our laser-like focus on Washington and, of course, other places. We are on Rumble. Please look us up on Rumble, and we will be back soon. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.